Humanity is facing an unprecedented crisis. COVID-19 shocked the world. But climate change doesn't wait. Inaction is not an option. It's time to act and come together. Cities and citizens are already forming a global wave of climate champions. In the last 4 years, the Climathon movement has grown from 600 to 6,000 participants across all 6 continents. And the momentum keeps on building. We need bold ambition. We need climate-resilient ideas and initiatives. We need a green recovery. Together, let's build back better. Join us on the Climathon journey. Take action. Co-create local ideas to shared climate challenges and build tangible and impact-driven projects. Get involved in shaping the future of your city. We are all in this together.
Hello and welcome to the Swiss National Panel Debate on priorities and perspectives for climate action. My name is Moritz-Christian and I will be your moderator today. Before I introduce today's topic and our inspiring panelists, let me briefly tell you a bit more about Climathon in Switzerland for those members of the general public who joined us. At a Climathon, participants with backgrounds from startups to corporate, students to scientists, activists to policymakers come together for 24 hours to work on innovative ideas that seek to help fighting climate change on a local level. In Switzerland, we have several Climathons happening this year, bringing about 500 people together to work together on these ideas. The best of the projects they come up with will be further supported by the respective Climathon partners to ensure that these ideas are implemented and not forgotten. Now to today's topic. Climate action is urgently needed as climate change is arguably the most important challenge humanity faces in the 21st century. Without further action, we will not be able to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and risk to set processes into motion that we will no longer be able to reverse later and which will lead to an upward spiral of further warming. We face scenarios involving the extinction of countless species, grave losses of biodiversity, and potentially a planet that will no longer be able to support a large human population. There's still hope, but only if we start acting decisively now. Climate change is complex, touching many areas of human life, but equally numerous are the possibilities to tackling it. And to understand the different approaches, how it's all being done, we have 4 panelists today who are active in the struggle against climate change. Let me introduce each of them in turn. The generations that are naturally most concerned about the potential devastating effects of climate change are those that will live to see it. To hear their voice and understand what they think, we have Marie-Claire Graf with us today. On an international level, she is active as the global focal point of YouNGO, the official children and youth constituency of the United Nations, Framework Convention on Climate Change. Difficult name. Furthermore, she represents the youth at international summits such as the Global Action Summit and was a representative of the Swiss delegation to the COP25 conference. Outside international institutions, she is also active by founding sustainable initiatives such as Sustainable Week Switzerland, is giving presentations as a climate reality leader trained by Al Gore, and is active in the International Fridays for Future movement. Let's welcome Marie-Claire. Thank you for being with us today. Now, when political action does fall short, NGOs are usually there to step in and try to do something about it, especially when these areas lack sufficient political lobbies. To understand the impact they can have, we have Thomas Vellacott from WWF with us WWF is one of the most well-known and influential environmental NGOs around the globe. Thomas has been leading WWF Switzerland since 2012 and has been one of its members for over 30 years. Apart from leading WWF Switzerland, he is also a board member of several impact and climate change oriented organizations such as Project X Global, Impact Hub Global, and Gold Standard. Let's welcome Thomas. Nice to have you here. An inconvenient truth about climate change is that our economy and our business practices are the root cause for the rising levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. To understand how a meaningful shift towards a more sustainable, circular and zero carbon economy can look like, we have Tom Mitchell, the Chief Strategy Officer from Climate-KIC, with us. He has, during his career, taken different perspectives on fighting climate change. First, he wrote his PhD thesis on climate and disaster risk management, and then continued to publish widely on climate resilience. He also was involved in one of the reports for the intergovernmental panels reports on climate change before leading the climate change team of the Overseas Development Institute for 6 years. In 2016, he joined Climate-KIC and its efforts for system-wide innovation to tackle climate change. One of its innovations you can see here today, because they organized the Climathon, which is now happening in over 150 cities worldwide. Last but not least, it is one thing to demand a more sustainable economy, and it's another to actually implement it on a business level. And to understand how companies, as large corporations, as well as entrepreneurs, take part in this endeavor, we have Connie Lowe with us. Connie Lowe is a founding member of Impact Hub Basel and is active in its startup scene. Before she took her passion for sustainability and human rights to the entrepreneurial level, she helped advise large companies on how to make their supply chains more sustainable. Connie, great to have you here with us as well. So now you know who we have on the panel today. So we can start with asking the questions that everyone is interested. What is already being done about climate change and how we can get on with it? So, Marie, you represent the younger generation at the United Nations, an institution where especially large and powerful member states have fallen short of taking decisive action for decades, citing their own economic self-interest. How do you and the younger generation attempt to change these states' position? And what change have you already observed since the youth took to the streets in millions?
Yeah, thank you so much. Welcome from my side back again. I'm very grateful to be here and thank you so much for the question. I think this is exactly where young people can come in and make a difference because we are not representing a member state. So the UN is built up of all the member states and they are all by consensus have to take decision, which of course can lead that some countries are just blocking because of their self-interest, scientific-based approaches. And when young people can come in, we can really truly speak from our heart. And I think this is what's missing in this setting, which we put rather divides. For example, we divide the countries in least developed countries and developed countries and small island developed countries. And we as young people, we just don't care about these divides and these boundaries which are put on us. We don't care if you're from the global south or from the global north, we all have an important stake. And by living this community, like many young people see themselves also as global citizens. I don't see myself only as a Swiss citizen and others are like, oh, I'm like from Peru, so I'm like someone different. We can come all together and speak on the same level and support each other. And I think this is the very ultimate difference we can have, and also that we don't have a lobby behind us. Of course, if you are representing a government with a very strong industry, maybe the industry paid you to be there. I mean, you then have to owe them something, and that might lead that you're not trusting the science, or you're at least not acting accordingly. And we as young people, we are here for us. We are here for the next generation. We can talk on behalf of the science. We can talk on behalf or like what we're seeing in nature. And this is different. And I think that's why it's so important that we have to change certain decision-making structures and bring in more young people, because very often young people don't have this history of being a lobbyist for someone, so they can really speak truly from the hearts. And I think this is what needed. If we would all speak truly from our hearts without having a lobby which is trying to put us and divide us, I think we would be at a very, very different stage at the moment.
Wow, that was a powerful statement. Thank you so much, Marie. Well, I have the feeling I actually want to learn more about it, but I'm pretty sure we will during the panel. First of all, I would like to ask Thomas, the climate change is endangering the very mission of the WWF of stopping the degradation of the planet's natural environment on many levels. How does the WWF address such an overarching threat? And where do you believe the WWF has an advantage compared to political institutions in taking action?
Thanks, Moritz. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the question. Look, for a very long time, NGOs such as WWF were a bit like the proverbial lonely prophet in the desert, you know, jumping up and down and shouting and telling everyone there's this dreadful thing called climate change. We should really be doing something about it. And I think the important thing is that we've moved beyond that. You know, we can't wait for the very last person to wake up to the reality of climate change. Thankfully, there are broad sections of society worldwide who recognize the issue and who recognize the need to be active. And you know, there are still people out there who believe the world is flat and climate change isn't happening, but we need to focus on the people who are ready to take action. And there's really three things we try to do in that fight. The first is to make it very clear that the climate crisis and the nature crisis, the biodiversity crisis, are two sides of the same coin. They're not separate things. And if we address only one of them, or if we address them separately, we risk doing really big damage. You know, we can plant lots of monoculture acacia plantations in Africa to suck carbon out of the atmosphere, but that's going to wreak havoc with nature and with people's livelihoods in these countries. So you really have to look at the two things together because they're so closely connected. And we've been working on both these issues for decades. The second thing we do is we want to build the broadest of coalitions for action on climate change. And you know, there's still so much mudslinging, so much trench warfare out there from people who consider an issue like the climate crisis from a sort of left-right political dimension, which is complete nonsense. Whether our children have a livable planet to inhabit has nothing to do whether you're left or right in a political spectrum. So we try to make it as, we try to move beyond these idiotic political divides and try and build coalitions that are prepared to move forward together. And the third thing we do is that we focus on action. There's a lot of talk about climate change. There's a lot of talk about biodiversity loss, but there's way less action. And what we want to do is ensure that there's real action, work with actors, whether they're companies or governments or movements or individuals, and help them take real action that makes a difference, because there is a lot of greenwashing out there, and we have to be really careful that we don't mistake real action and greenwashing. So that's one of the roles we can play to make sure that we distinguish one from the other, and we really go for ambitious action. So it's about this combination of climate crisis and nature crisis. It's about building broad coalitions, and it's about taking real action rather than lots of words.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And it is a perfect way to introduce Tom, because Climate-KIC believes in innovation at systems level, like real innovation, no greenwashing. And in doing so, you follow an approach of supporting many different but connected ideas. In doing this, you have 4 focus areas, and one of them is cities, which are responsible of 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions today. Can you maybe explain to us how your approach works to transform these cities? And if the current pandemic and its disruption effects have positive or negative impact in doing so?
Thank you, Moritz. And also, hello to everybody. I'm always so excited on this day of the calendar, Climathon Day, because it's an opportunity to meet so many people and to get enthused by the fact that there are cities across 6 continents today setting their climate change challenges and inviting innovators and entrepreneurs from all corners of society to help solve those challenges. And I think what I always really enjoy as well is the opportunity to connect across very different cultural settings, different continents, and that have Berlin connect to Bogota and from Basel to Bangalore and so on. It's just such a delight. Now, from Climate-KIC's perspective, we've been around for about 10 years. And as Moritz said, what we've been trying to do during that time is bring innovation to help solve climate change. And we often think about innovation in this sphere of technology. It's about people in white coats conducting experiments and trying to come up with new inventions and bringing them to market and finding investment and so on. And that's an important part of the mix. We know that. We know we need new technologies to help solve climate change. But equally now, we've actually got most of what we need. It's not that there are major technology barriers to tackling climate change. We've got many of them in place. And yet we still move forward with the idea that technology innovation is the way to solve the problem, and that's where we focus our efforts. Well, in Climate-KIC, we looked across our community. We work across 28 countries or so. We have 450 partners. And we asked the question of what does it mean to innovate now to tackle climate change? What will really make the difference? And one of the key things that we found and understood is that we need to bring innovation to lots of different parts of society, both in the way we think about governance and leading places, the way we think about engaging citizens and what climate action means, the way we finance things. And we need new ideas across that whole range of whole parts of society that will allow us to scale up what we know how to do, make the chance of getting to net zero or transforming our places possible. And that's what, for the last 2 years, Climate-KIC has been taking into a set of cities. We have 15 cities that are part of a program at the moment that are ready to commit to incredibly ambitious goals to be carbon neutral or to be net zero or to be leaders around the world. Some of them even by 2028, certainly by 2030. And what we do there to really try and see what's possible is to put a lot of experiments into action simultaneously. A connected set of carefully designed experiments to see how to shift the way in which we think about economy and society and so on in such a way that we can transform faster than we think. It's about triggering exponential change. And the reason why I think that's now even more pertinent is because in COVID-19, we've seen that actually our cities change incredibly quickly, albeit in this case, not by design. You know, we've not necessarily gone out and invented a pandemic to do that, but we've seen that there is a force that radically changes the way we live and work and play. Now, the question is, what happens next? Can we, by design, think about a really positive transformation that means we all live better lives, healthier lives, but to do so in a way that we meet the needs of a 1.5 degree future? That's what Climate-KIC is focused on, and that's what Climathon has the opportunity to do. Multiple voices, diverse voices across society coming together to design solutions that can be put in place simultaneously, because there's certainly no time to wait to do things in dribs or drabs or wait 10 years in long public consultations. Thank you.
Wow, I again want to ask a question, but I believe we should first welcome Connie officially to the table to also give her a chance to explain what she's doing. And Connie, I'm wondering, for large companies, it's often seen as expensive to make their businesses and supply chains more sustainable. Otherwise, many more would already do so. And what do you believe? How can they be convinced to do so nonetheless? And are entrepreneurs really automatically in a better position due to greater flexibility?
Thank you, Moritz. Thanks for having me. For big corporates, it is indeed quite difficult, and the assumption that is often more expensive is very widespread, but I don't think that's always true. So it depends on who I'm talking to in the corporate. So if I'm talking to people who are willing to do something really fast, there are low-hanging fruits. For example, if we look at just packaging, by reducing packaging, you are reducing your costs. And so, there are a few things we can get people in to really say, hey, this is not so hard after all, even though, of course, we need to look at the entire footprint of the company as well. For budget holders, of course, they look at the numbers, and a lot of companies around the world at the moment, big corporates are internalizing these externality costs. So what does it mean when we have social impact or environmental impact in the world? What does that transform to dollars or francs, right? And how does that compare in our balance sheet at the moment? So I think that piece of work around the world is being led by very big companies like B Corp as well, is giving these internal change makers a lot of I guess evidence that, hey, this is important, and this we are actually covering not just the financial piece, but also value for the impact we have on the world. And then I would say that the last piece is not so much convincing, but rallying the change makers internally. So often they might not be the ones who are the heads of departments. They might be ones who are just an analyst in a team, but who has the energy and the power to want to change internally in each department. So a lot of my work back in my corporate days was to rally these group of people internally to also change from inside out. And that piece of work was the most exciting for me. I guess that was a quote by Margaret Mead that says, like, never underestimate the action of a small group of people. Indeed is what has always worked, right? And so that brought me to Impact Hub, which is one of the largest communities for building bottom-up innovation, not just from a startup perspective, but also innovators within current companies, SMEs, big corporates, but also governments and NGOs. So we tend to think that we have a neutral platform to bring all these players together. Today is a very good example for Climathon. We're bringing I'm here in Basel at the moment, bringing in the city of Basel. We also have some companies involved, and of course our citizens. Not just in Basel, we know that this is happening across the world, and I'm super excited to be here today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So before moving on to priorities for our actions, I would like to touch upon something that I heard rang through in many of your answers, and that is about building broad coalitions, something that seems to work very well at Climathon, where people from all backgrounds come together, forget their backgrounds, and work on the solutions. But on a more global level, it seems that there are always the different countries. We have the South, we have the North, we have poor countries, rich countries, we have people from the left or from the right, as Thomas said. What would you say is the best way to actually overcome these boundaries of in the mind of the people to identify with a certain position rather than to focus on the problem at hand, especially because many of these people are in a type of bubble or got it from their parents and then have the same opinions for all their lives? What has to happen to build these broader coalitions?
I can have a go. Please chip in, everyone else. But look, as I said, I wouldn't try and convince the unconvinced, but really focus on building, coalitions of the willing, people who want to move forward. And I think there's an incredible dynamic there, which many people don't see. There is a lot of collaboration happening. Take an example when President Trump decided to take the US out of the Paris Climate Accord. Within 3 weeks, you had the largest climate movement the US had ever seen develop. You had states, you had companies, you had universities, you had municipalities coming together. So I think there is much more of a sense that, you know, we're not going to solve this alone. We are only going to solve this together. And, you know, one of the prerequisites for good coalition building is to kind of put your own ego to the side. It's not about, you know, the WWF solution to the climate problem. You don't need to brand stuff. It's not about my solution is better than your solution. It's really, it requires a genuine openness and a genuine focus on impact and preparedness to measure whether we're making a difference, and then really to get together and yeah, sort of step back as an individual or as an organization and see yourself as part of an incredibly dynamic movement, and thinking about how can you best contribute to that movement.
Yeah, I think my input would go very much in the same direction as you mentioned, Thomas, that we need way less ego and rather like focus on the solution and putting all the people who want to work on a specific solution together. And then also like at the United Nations, it's all a lot about, okay, who put in what, whose logo belongs where. And then we very easily forget that it's about the thing, it's about the cause we are here. And also it was before the whole Corona time, I was at an event where we didn't have the name tags, but basically we had a sticker where we could write our vision of the day. And I think it's also really much about like, how do we introduce ourselves? Like sometimes you get like the card with like director and executive general, whatever, and then you're already lost of what the person actually is doing, instead of writing your vision or what you're actually here for, your cause. And if you, I mean, it might seem like a little bit, okay, it's like a tiny thing, but if we are approaching people in this open way with what we would like to achieve and why are we here, I think we can build way more collaboration, because especially for young people or maybe also for other people, it can be very intimidating if there is someone with like such a CV with like so many titles, and then you come in like, okay, who I am, how can I even contribute? And to overcome this, it takes very often a long time. We don't have the time. So maybe we can shift in this direction and just approach people on the same level and rather work on, okay, how can we move together forward instead of, okay, what have we been already doing and putting a list of titles.
Thank you, Melika. I think you wanted to say something. Could you add maybe in 2-3 sentences before we move on to the priorities?
Yes, I agree with what Thomas and Marie-Claire have said. One very quick example is just for versus virus, this hackathon that was put together in Switzerland because of the wave 1 COVID crisis was brought together with 20 organizations. You know, we do not know to this day, I do not know to this day, what each and every single person who joined this coalition is doing in their day jobs. We just got together and say, hey, what can we do for Switzerland? For the virus situation. So now that we all got to know each other, and actually a lot of the partners we have got to know are working on things like Climathon today, right? The behind the scenes gurus are one of them. And so I think it's really about relationship building as well. So how do you drop egos and build a relationship so that we can transfer learning to a crisis like climate change?
Thank you, Connie. I have the feeling we already learned a lot of how to approach Climathon. Now, maybe let's focus a bit more on what we should do, because there seem to be many different ideas around how to take climate action, ranging from more investments in renewable energy, introduction of a carbon tax, more sustainable food, all the way to managing the size of the populations through eliminating poverty. So my question to you is, what actions would, in your opinion, have the most impact, and how would a feasible strategy look like?
All right, so maybe I can kick off on this one.
Yes.
So I think there's been really good analysis that highlights that there are certain things we do now that we should stop doing that will have a huge impact. One of which is eating meat. And we know that the dietary habits that we have in Europe and making good choices around that will have probably, certainly in the analysis shows, will probably have the biggest single impact. But in some ways, the point that I'm wanting to make is that it's not really a choice about one thing or another now. We are in a climate emergency. We've got thousands of cities across the world and countries who've declared a climate emergency. What does it really mean to treat the climate change challenge as an emergency? It doesn't mean just choosing to do one thing. Just stopping myself eating beef is an important step, but equally that's a tiny part of the problem. So my suggestion would be is let's think about the mix of things that we should be doing now that is both enriching for the life that we lead, for the health of people, but it equally equates to something that is an emergency reaction. And for me, that means all of the things that you've listed are all really important to pursue simultaneously. You know, if we wait and say, well, actually, this seems really tough to put in place, actually, we'll do that in 10 or 20 years' time when the politics is a bit easier. Yeah, that's an important reaction to take on board, but equally, it's an emergency. Running procurement processes where the procurement process takes 3 years to complete and 2 more years to get into action, and we only start work in 5 years' time, then equally that doesn't work either. And I heard this week from a Minister of Finance in Europe who had that foremost as his concern. So all of those things is let's treat it as an emergency, let's recognize what we can do personally, and let's do all of the things simultaneously with the type of energy that we've brought to tackling the COVID emergency. Let's do the same in the climate space.
I think it's absolutely correct what you've been saying, that we do have to come up with an emergency response and do as many things as possible. What I believe a lot of the people think when they see COVID in contrast to climate change is they see people dying now. Well, in climate change, people and animals and many plants will die in 20, 30 years from now if we remain idle. How can we make sure that they know the emergency? Thomas said we have to work with the people that already are sensibilized for climate change, but how can we get this message of this emergency more across so that more of these actions are actually taken?
Well, maybe on this, so I mean, it's not true that people are only going to die in some years. I mean, people are already dying now. People have been dying in the past. It's just maybe not like, you cannot say like, okay, this is climate change and this is like why the hurricane happened. It's about accelerating it and so on. But it's not the way, because I think like most of the people know it. But it's very hard to act, especially as a citizen. I have been talking at another panel. It was like, is it possible in Switzerland to live on one planet? And it's very, very hard. I mean, like doing WWF calculator and then just seeing that still, if I'm trying to behave very like climate friendly, I'm still like living as we have 2 planets. And I think this is where also the systemic challenges coming in, what also young people are demanding. I mean, many people are demanding the system change, that if it's not possible for us to live in a system which requires 1 planet, it's very, very hard to get out. And one point I would really like to highlight is the finance part, also because just the BAFU, the UFAS in English, just put out the report about how like the investment of Swiss banks and institutions is still heavily based on fossil fuels. And I mean, this is our future. They are like investing for our future, but they're just failing so hard. So I think it's very important that, of course, we are focusing what we all can do, but very like in a transformative way. Okay, how is this what I'm doing like leading to a transformation? So when we are, for example, talking about the diets, okay, how can we accelerate the real food transformation and movement? Because the food system is contributing to 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions. So it's one of the biggest contributors to the climate crisis, but it can also be the biggest solution we are having, and nature is our biggest ally. And very often we still see nature as a resource we can just take stuff out and just dump things back, when we are not seeing, for example, also soil, not seeing as the solution we are having. And I think this is what we need. We need to shift the minds, and we can do this through climathons. Maybe we need just more climathons. We need to make it through education, and everyone, basically what Thomas mentioned, like that everyone is talking about it as we are in a crisis, because if you're not recognizing the crisis, we are never getting there.
I think I'm not convinced that what we need to do is kind of, shake everyone and get them to realize how bad things are. I think a lot of people understand how bad things are. So there's kind of this idea that, we've got to just keep showing ever more shocking images. I'm not sure. A vast majority gets it. I think someone once explained to me that in nature conservation and environmental topics, the correct answer, if you think in terms of multiple choice, the correct answer is usually all of the above. It's not about, is this the better solution or this or this? There are no silver bullets. And sometimes, and again, this comes back to what we talked about earlier, sometimes it has more to do with ego, as in, you know, my solution is more important. I'm working on the bigger topic than you. We really don't need that. And we really don't, you know, there's also this, in my view, not very useful debate about, do we need individual action or do we need systemic action? We need both. We need everything we can get our hands on. So very concretely, what do you do? I think, you know, several things have already been said. It's the urgency. Tom talked about, you know, if you can't get it to scale within the next 10 years, maybe you want to think again, because we don't have that much time. You know, this isn't about bringing something to market in 2080 or something. I would also think about, you know, there's often crowding in this space. People will go into areas where a lot of other people are already doing things. I don't know how many ventures I've already been pitched at that want to get rid of plastic straws. And don't get me wrong, it's really good to get rid of plastic straws, but maybe there are other areas that require focus as well. So think about, where is there less crowding? You know, seasonal storage of energy, for example, or retrofitting buildings. You know, these are really important areas, or low carbon shipping, really important areas where we need lots of innovation, and yet they're not so much in the limelight. So think about where you can make a real difference in the next 10 years and maybe consider some of the less crowded fields.
Yes, that is absolutely right. And I have a question about these crowded fields, or of doing everything we can to do it now and not in 10 years. I have the feeling on an individual level, a lot of people are already making changes. On a corporate level, it seems that some companies try to still meddle through. So I was wondering, and I'm asking you, Tom, for example, a carbon tax, wouldn't it force companies to use the technology that we already have and actually implement it? Because if they do not do it, they eventually have to pay up. Is that a strong incentive, or is it just too much regulation?
So I've always had the view that a carbon tax, or anything that prices properly the externalities, the impacts of the economy that we face, and effectively penalizes the damage to the environment, would of course be a very strong signal and a behavioral shift. Now, the carbon tax idea has been around for a long, long time, and there's been enormous struggles to move it to implementation and so on. And I think we have to go back to this question of what is going to be the short-term emergency solutions. Now, it may be that with a Biden administration and an alignment with climate action in many other parts of the world and commitments to 2050 net zero and something, the political climate may shift, making it possible. But equally, waiting for a carbon tax to be a solve-all is equally not an option either. What I would suggest instead, or in addition, is that the movement of other parts of society sends signals to business, and that the signals that business need to hear is that consumer behavior is changing, people's needs are changing, and equally the sources of finance have a very different signal to those business practices. Now, I think we've got a little bit obsessed in the business world of reporting on TCFD, for those of you who know that, or investing in ESG and so on. And a lot of those, quite frankly, are measures that make companies feel just a little bit better about what they're doing, or at least even present an opportunity for greenwashing. And I think that with that, we've got to really be ready to reward the companies that are putting their hand in and saying, look, we will be the part of the change. We will lead the change here, rather than just try to convince you that we're green and doing the right thing, where we actually still keep going on and doing what we've always been doing. One way to detect this, of course, is to actually follow the money and look at where the shareholder considerations are happening, and to use the type of tools that you can now access online that look at companies' shareholder interests and voting and so on, to get a real sense of who's actually doing the right thing, as opposed to who's just trying to convince you. And I think the money and the purchasing power that we have will probably shift things faster than waiting for a carbon tax, but that's just my personal view.
That's perfectly to a question we got from the audience regarding greenwashing and how to spot it. I do not want to take too much time on this, but Thomas, could you briefly comment on it as you brought it up initially before I get to your closing statements?
Yeah, happy to. Greenwashing is a subject that I've been looking at for a long time. It's some really easy ways to spot greenwashing. Number one, does a company publish numbers, or are there reports full of beautiful pictures of projects or hands holding globes, and things like that? Are they really reporting numbers about what, and not about some little project, but about their core business? So number one. Number two, is their approach science-based? Do they reference some system? For example, there's a system called science-based targets, where you derive your targets as a company from the Paris Climate Accord and what was set there. So are you in line with the Paris Climate Accord or not? If you just make up targets, then that's not particularly useful. So you want them linked to an external system like science-based targets. Does the company report on progress, or do they just announce lofty goals? Do they have milestones, or do they just say we want to be at net zero carbon emissions by 2050? Or do they tell you what they're going to do in the next 12 or 24 months? And finally, do they just tell you themselves, or do they get some third party in to verify that and to certify that they're in any way sort of credible? So those are the sort of things I would look at. And I'll give you a concrete example, because several people have mentioned the financial sector. According to to numbers published this summer by Swiss Sustainable Finance, a third of assets under management in Switzerland are sustainably managed. 1/3. That's a huge number. Now that is brilliant, but that is also containing a lot of greenwashing, because that number is by self-declaration. We need clear numbers, we need clear criteria, and instead of just self-declaration. Otherwise, people are going to get very cynical about these things.
Or very quickly, I mean, yesterday I got this beautiful letter, and I was really shocked to see some of the companies on the other side, which have like beautiful sustainability reports, talk about their very good impact, and then seeing that they're supporting initiatives going against, you see the companies publicly. So it's also good to do a little bit of research, because not everything what looks shiny and nice, as Thomas mentioned on the first hand, is actually good. And I think such initiatives, you can go to the list and see very well like who is in favor of it and who not.
That's actually a great point. There are a lot of companies who do stuff in their own business, but don't do the same thing in their value chain, and often do the opposite through the different industry associations that they support.
Wow, that was again very insightful. And I just want to thank Martin Scanlon for bringing this question up in our live stream chat. Unfortunately, we are near the end of our panel discussion, but we have many people at the Climathons interested in taking climate action. So I would just give each of you the chance to say maybe 2 sentences, how they can keep being involved in this struggle after Climathon, and what you would advise them to do. So 2 sentences from everyone. Maybe Connie, we haven't heard from you in a while, so I'll let you start.
Sure. For me, it's the easy one. So visit your impact hub afterwards, locally, and also all the other organizations that are organizing Climathon today. I think there's a lot of support out there that can help you transform some of the ideas to reality. But I think a very important part of Climathon is to learn also how you can bring your ideas to action, not just maybe in the projects you're working on today, but it could be transferred to other projects you're working on already, personally or at work.
Tom, do you want to go next?
I think one of the pieces of advice that I would give is that I would make an invitation for people involved to look around them and say, are these the type of people that I would normally be collaborating with? Are they kind of my friends, or I'm working in similar institutions or similar areas? And if they are, that's probably not the right mix. Go and look for others that you've not met, from different backgrounds, from those that you might not normally have ever really wanted to talk about, but are there with an idea. Because what we've learned again and again is that the ability to change systems, to radically rethink what we do, will not tend to come from those sitting in incumbent power bases or just in some of the biggest organizations. They come from radically different collaborations. And so please reach out, find the person or find the group that you've not normally been talking to, and really try and engage in something about what you can create together.
Thank you. Marie, do you want to go next?
Yes, I think it's very important that we have people being outside of the political powerhouses, and we need people inside. This can be the canton or the local or the national parliaments. So please make use of your political power, because many very important and good solutions are not being implemented on a broad scale, or not at least in the time it has to, because it's not politically viable, and we can change this.
We know who is left. Thomas, your time to shine.
So, I mean, the first step you've taken, which is act fast and act at scale. My second point would be collaborate with others. And I like Tom's point about the unlikely allies. Collaborate with others as if your life depended on it, because it does. And finally, stay hopeful, not blind hopeful in terms of ignoring reality, but informed hopeful in terms of paying attention to all the shifts which are now happening in the world economy, which are still too slow, but which are happening and which we can accelerate and build on. So stay hopeful and help others to stay hopeful, because if we lose hope, we stop acting.
Thank you so much. And with this, unfortunately, our panel is getting to its end, because it is so interesting. I could talk about it for a few more hours, but we want to give the Climathon participants a chance to actually work on their innovative solutions to make a difference. But if I take three things from this panel debate, these are the following. First is we need to build broad coalitions, and we should not label a solution A or B and give it to some name or company, but really focus on the solution and work towards it. The second is we really need to start treating this crisis, as a climate emergency, and do all we can to address it. Now, last but not least is we should also be aware of greenwashing, and we should check if companies really follow actual targets or if they just make them up. And with that, I would like to thank all of the panelists very much for participating. You've been very insightful, and I believe not only I learned a lot, but also the people in front of the live stream. The last element we have for you today is a message from the Federal Swiss Office of Energy. Here we have Lukas Stadelmann, who works there in the Digital Innovation Office, and he is involved with the topic of open innovation and would like to introduce why the SFOE is interested in open innovation approach and events such as Climathon, and how you can work with them together to create even more Climathons in the future. Lucas, I give you the stage for a few minutes.
Hi everyone, so thanks for inviting me. I'm really glad to be part and to be here. Thanks also for the panel, it was really inspiring and interesting. Let me quickly share my screen here. All right. So thing is, we found ourselves in a very particular time. On the one hand, we're facing huge challenges regarding climate change. But as we heard before, let's not lose our hope, because on the other hand, we have technology, and specifically digital technology, that has never been stronger and offers more and more solutions. And we are also facing a lot of positive initiatives and consciousness toward environment and climate subjects in the population, and strongly, very strongly in the younger generations, which is definitely a good thing. And the Swiss Federal Office of Energy has set its goal to tap into the vast potential of motivated, intelligent, and talented people that actually wants to make a difference now and not wait for long political and regulation processes that we have heard are influenced by left, right thoughts and influences. So, and in our opinion, that's where the potential for bottom-up open innovation lies, right? So there are plenty of good ideas out there. There are plenty of motivated and talented people, and we want to include and grasp all those ideas and those initiatives to actually make a change now. So, but let's start our positioning right now. So things that are always decided is the Paris Agreement. So we committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and and we also committed to the Energy Strategy 2050, which is built on increasing energy efficiency in buildings, in mobility, in industry, and devices. We also want to increase the use of renewable energy, mainly solar and hydro, but also wind and others. And the problem is that we are shifting towards a decentralized energy production, right? So you have to think about, we have a huge infrastructure that was designed decades ago, and now we're turning everything upside down, right? And it's not an easy task. We see digitalization as a way for the transformation of the whole sector. So what is the link to open innovation? So, I mean, of course, we could sit in our offices in Bern and develop an innovation master plan, but that's not how innovation works, and sadly, we're not smart enough. So we really need the involvement of the broader population. We need to know what are the needs of the population, what is the public's opinion on topics such as climate protection, digitalization, innovation, and these all are important and lead to innovation that are also broadly accepted and supported. And this is a process that cannot be done top down. So what you see here is actually all our strategy for open innovation. And the first step, the open innovation events, such as the Climathons, I mean, that's the base. That's, in my opinion, it's the most important point for the whole process, because it's the basis. So that's where the big ideas come from. And as Tom said, like the middle step, the hackathons, where you have developers trying to make solutions, it's also very important. But the big idea, we are looking for the big ideas, right? And I want really to motivate you. So don't throw away your shot. It's a big opportunity. It's a huge opportunity to put your brickstone into the digitalization of the Energy Strategy 2050, or to put a piece to the Energy Strategy 2050. We hope that the results of the Climathon will get to a project or a proof of concept, and that will lead us forward. So thank you so much. I encourage you, don't throw away your shot, give your best, because take yourself serious, because we absolutely are taking you serious too. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas, for this input. Now I would like to address the participants for once. Good luck in the next 24 hours to come up with new solutions that help all of us in your respective city to be more climate friendly. For those members of the general public who enjoy this and who want to learn more about the ideas, follow the respective Festival of Ideas of your local Climathon. And last but not least, I would like to once again thank all the panelists. It was a joy having you here and enlighten us. And I believe we should give our audience one last wave if you are still with us. think, Tom, I see you. And yes, thank you so much. This has been it from us. And thank you for watching. And please treat the climate emergency as an emergency from now on, if you have not already done so. Thank you.